what's your take on the Brownlow Medal and if it's a fair assessment of success for football?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I think if you look at the cold hard facts, it's probably not the most representative measure of the best player in the season. But I also think it's because of the way the Brownlow is actually the way it operates. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all umpires, isn't it? They are the ones.
3 umpires, end of the game.
Yeah.
Do their 3-2-1.
Yeah. So I think obviously it's not a dig at umpires. I think they're sensational. But I think obviously when you've only got one, I guess, group of stakeholders deciding the voting system, that can obviously skew it. So yeah, I'm not sure if it is the best measure of the best player in a season. With that being said, I think there are other awards. Like you've obviously got the Coleman Medal for most goals kicked. You've got I think it's the AFL MVP award, which I know again is contentious as well because it seems like all the most valuable players are midfielders. But I just think they're probably the broader conversation is, can we think of different ways to acknowledge excellence? Because I think it's not so much do we need to change the Brownlow, but it's more so, there are different forms of excellence. Can we think of different ways to recognise that and award it? In a schooling context, I think, it's so difficult because I think we've all got students who are absolute superstars in certain facets, but struggle in others. And unfortunately, and again, it's obviously a big topic, but standardized testing and everything, that definitely presents issues around equity and whether or not we're actually playing to our students' strengths. This might be a bit of a tenuous link, but I sort of thought back to, it was 2018. So it was my fourth year, my final year in uni, and I was lucky enough to spend a month and a bit in the UAE. So I was doing my international placement rounds at an international school in the United Arab Emirates, and they ran a hybrid VCE / international baccalaureate program. I just remember really, I didn't teach the year 12s that year, but I just remember as part of the IB program, and things might have changed, but my understanding is as part of the IB program, every single final year student actually essentially does a passion project. They do a whole research assignment and project around an area that interests them. And they write up a report. They have to do, work around the community. They need to collate all that and then essentially turn it into like a presentation or some kind of written assignment. Maybe that's the way to go, because you're allowing students to play to their strengths, play to their interests, but also with there's enough rigor there for it to be a really good assessment of success and excellence as well. So perhaps it's about moving, I guess, the model of assessment towards something that's a little bit more student-centered. But that's just sort of my 2 cents. I'd be interested to hear maybe.
Yeah, like we've all seen those quotes where it sort of reads along the lines of, music students don't have to be able to, do maths well, and and you can obviously put any subjects you want in those quotes. So and obviously, like George, I'm not asking you to revolutionize school assessments in one night.
Oh, I was looking for that question.
I'm sure I'm sure if you do, there'll be some people out there who will be thanking you for that. But I'm like, George, what's your take on the Brownlow Medal? Do you think it should be revered in this way? Like you look up a player on the in Wikipedia, that no one ever says, oh, they won the best and fairest 5 times. Or they might do, but it's always down the bottom of the article. Like it's always about, they won 2 Brownlows and this and that, and the other. Like George, do you think the Brownlow Medal is a great, an effective way to gauge, player performance in the season, or do you think that, do you think it's maybe not the best guide to do that? What do you think?
It's a good question. I also want to do a little plug for Wikipedia. For those of you that are using Wikipedia out there, kids, if you're using that, please don't use it. To get started.
Or clicking through the Encyclopedia Britannica or something. I don't know. Whatever.
Whatever you.
Or TikTok. Everything's going to be TikTok nowadays. Anyway, George, what do you think on the Brownlow Medal?
I think I think it's always with this sort of, it's always to a degree, right? So I think with the Brownlow, there's a lot of noise about it and stuff because it's the end of the year and, it's sort of really well respected.
And everyone dresses up and it's the night of nights.
Yeah, and it's great that they celebrate and enjoy it. And, Charlie is sort of mentioned a lot, which is great because it's sort of like a really important, I mean, the history behind it's awesome. But like, I'll be really honest with you. I'm not too sure who Charlie Brownlow actually played for. Might have been John.
He played for Melbourne.
Melbourne? Yeah, potentially.
Did he play for Melbourne? I know it's a very small medal. Like it's like
50 cents
the
worth,
size of your fingers. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting one where there are like certain biases in there as well. And I agree with like what Hilson, you said, sort of like, there's other awards and medals and stuff for other particular things. And we're also, asking an individual award for a team sport. Like let's take it with a massive grain of salt. But also when you think about like, same with your team practice, like with NAPLAN, there are some great things about it, which is useful. It gives you a gauge, but then you often like try to triangulate this stuff with some other data as well. So it might be interesting, maybe a more effective method would be, who gets a Brownlow and looks at, they invariably might get their best fairest at their club and they might win the AFL Players Award or the Coaches Award. That might be the best player that season. I know you're thinking about Dusty from 2017, so fair enough. But I think with those assessments, right? Like, of course, any sort of that's the nature of a standardized assessment, though, isn't it? It's going to give you a ballpark area of what it is, and then you take other qualitative bits of data, quantitative bits of data to sort of make your call. So yeah, I remember doing an essay back at uni for NAPLAN, 2,000 words pro and 2,000 words against it. Like I think. It's a great conversation. We can look into heaps about NAPLAN and chat about it. There are relevant parts of it, and there are parts where you sort of. I just think with the Brownlow, it's great, it's awesome. Yeah, good on Ollie Wines for getting it, winning it, really deserved. But there were other players that were really good as well. Simple with NAPLAN, like your top student isn't just going to be the best reading writing students, more the growth, right? So Ollie Wines the growth, the great conversation. Look how far he's grown from the days in Echuca and all that sort of.
He was about to be traded, I think, a few years ago, wasn't he, boys? Like he was
Carlton man. I think he was going to come down to our club, maybe.
Yeah.
So
it's a nice redemption story. I think it's a nice redemption story what Ollie Wines has done.
I think the story itself is great to talk about. Like Brownlow medals is definitely going to be an awesome thing on. I think that's a great celebration for Ollie and the growth from there. But that's also where you take, any sort of assessment. An assessment's useful for a certain point in time, but it has a pretty good use by date. Like, that's something. So take it all with all those contexts behind it. Is it really heavily midfielder driven? Yeah. Our midfielder is probably the most important players on the ground. That's debatable. Some could say yes.
A lot of reasons, I think, just before we move on, I think there are a lot of reasons why it's midfielders. I'm guessing like it's an easy way to assess performance. Like I'm sure the umpires, like they've got a busy job. They're not going to be able to remember who had the best impact on a game. And I'm sure they just look at the stats.
Well, the umpires,
maybe at the end of the game you go, look, who's got the most numbers and award them 3-2-1.
Well, we never know. We never know exactly what the umpires are doing, but also the other one.
It's all speculation for the moment.
But the other ones to sort of keep in mind, the umpire's job isn't at the end of the game to go, "Hey, he was the best player."
Correct.
So I think it's a great award, and I love that the umpires have their say because they don't get a say in a lot of other things. They pretty much get.
Why can't the coaches? Oh, the coaches have a.
There's a coaches award.
Coaches award, yeah. It's always it's a reason. It's another conversation for another day though. Why we revere the Brownlow so much, more than the other awards. I don't understand that actually.
But here's a fun way to spin it the other way, right? Like Brownlow medalists though are good players. Like I haven't seen a bad Brownlow medalist. So I guess like that's that award, that recognition from the context of it being umpires and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it'd be interesting in the classroom. Like it'd be like, I guess NAPLAN's probably some sort of way of sort of the closest analogy. Like who are the umpires, I guess, in the classroom? Like it wouldn't necessarily be the teachers, it wouldn't be the kids. That's a really interesting. That might be a big thought discussion for later. But I think it's about like the story behind it. So. And that's what data is. Like sometimes we forget data actually is more than just those binary things. There's actually more to it. So.
Thank you for listening to Three Teachers Talk.
Remember to click like and subscribe to keep up to date with our latest conversations.
keep the conversation going by giving us feedback and let us know what you'd like to talk about next. Thank you.